All right. I'd like to go ahead and call to order the July 6th Gig Harbor Parks Commission meeting. We can start with a roll call. Parks Commission Chair Ben Coronado. And if you could just say here after. Georgina Armstrong.
Here.
And Les McCallum.
Here.
And Stephanie Lyle.
Here.
And Georgina Armstrong.
Yeah, here again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Trying to flip flop between the agenda.
I'm really here.
Yes, you are doubly here. And Stace Gordon, if you're able to unmute and recognize yourself.
Yeah, there we go. And okay, yes, hi. Stace is here.
All right, Stace, hi. And then from the City of Gig Harbor, we have Public Works Director Jeff Langhelm.
Here.
And Parks Manager Matthew Keogh.
Present.
And City Clerk Josh Stecker.
I'm here.
And then we have a few attendees in there as well. So hopefully we'll give you guys an opportunity to give public comment if you're here for that, or to weigh in on any of the agenda items at the appropriate time. But we'll go ahead and move along with the approval of tonight's agenda. If there is a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I move it.
All right, and I'll second. All in favor of approving tonight's agenda as written, say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. All right, we'll go ahead and approve the agenda as written. And agenda item number 2 is the approval of the June 1st Parks Commission meeting minutes. And if there isn't a motion to approve the June 1st minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
All right. And there was a second, I think I heard.
I second.
Thank you, Stephanie. Any discussion on that? Was there any hiccups or anything like that in the agenda? I didn't see any personally. All in favor of approving the minutes as written, say aye.
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 All right. Any opposed? All right. The June 1st Parks Commission meeting minutes are approved as written. Okay, we'll open it up to agenda item number 3 tonight, which is the public comment. If there's anybody from the attendees list who would like to provide public comment for the Parks Commission, we'll opportune you 3 minutes. I'll keep a track on the timer. If you could just state your name and address for the record and raise your hand, and Josh Stecker will move you over to the panelists, and you'll have an opportunity to provide 3 minutes of public comment. If you're just here to attend, that's fine too. Or if you'd like to give public comment on specific agenda items, I could recognize you then when we get to those agenda items. But yeah, if there's anybody who'd like to give public comment, now would be the opportunity to raise your hand.
Not seeing any raised hands.
Okay, then we will certainly move on to discussion item, to agenda item number 4, discussion item A, which is the sports complex phase 1B update. I think recently there was an open house, but Jeff, I'll just hand it off to you. And I know there's an open house, and that's about as far as I got.
Yeah,
I know we're looking forward to things.
We are. Yeah, there's a lot going on. So just backing up a little bit, because we're probably all very familiar with the Sports Complex Phase 1B project, but just backing up a little bit, the city and the city's consultant, BCRA, proceeded forward after the contract was approved in March of 2022 with the design and permitting work for the Sports Complex Phase 1B project. The city held an open house on May 7th. That was a staff-led informational open house. Staff was there and had conversations with the public regarding the history and the future of the sports complex as a whole, all phases. There was significant interest at this meeting from both newer residents and those who were unfamiliar with past sports complex efforts, and the status and the path forward for each of the separate phases were outlined, and the stakeholders who had been involved in the past also were there to show up and their support, and they made it known that they wanted to see some progress on phase 1A and 1B. So that's a quick summary of that open house. And then we had another open house specifically for phase 1B on June 28th. The city and the consultant held an open house. We were there to talk about specific project design details and receive public comment and input on some of those specific design details. Also to look at the sports complex the phase 1B project overall. And I'm going to share with you what was included. Hopefully all of you received the memo with all of the boards that were presented at the June 28th meeting. I'm going to share my screen and we'll look at those and make sure I got that up. Yeah, okay. There we go. Okay, hopefully all of you can see my screen now. So this is one of the boards that was presented at the open house. Showed the general site layout. It should look very familiar. It is very familiar. It's very similar to what was presented to Recreation Conservation Office back in September of 2020. And based on the grant that we received, it's basically summarizing what was proposed at that point. The next board that was viewed at the open house, there was a series of, I think, four themed playground equipment. So there was this one here, the forest theme, the historic fishing play theme, the historically themed traditional play, like you see in generally many locations, and then a nature themed traditional play. So these were just some options and concepts. They had pros and cons listed around or on the board. Received some votes with dots on preferred layouts and themes. Then this one here, the nature themed, received the most dots and the most support. Then at that, oh, Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, how, I don't know, how many attendees were in the voting populace?
I don't have the final number, but there was a, Matt, what would you say? There was probably a couple dozen people at the most, maybe 18.
Jeff, I think you may have 18 votes, but people actually were handed, I don't know where your number came from, but people were handed multiple dots. So they actually had 4 dots per participant. And just candidly, the participation numbers then suggest they were lower than 18.
Okay. So not very many people showed up. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So then one of the other boards we're talking about pickleball colors. The layout and location are established, but looking for input on colors. So received quite a bit of input, and preferred one that was most popular was this color pattern here. And then rendering of what the bocce ball court could look like was shown. This is based on preliminary input from the consultants and city staff. That is, and I'm going to be talking about this a little bit, but there's an ADA accessible path to get in and out of the bocce ball court. There's 3 bocce ball courts in total. There's a unique stamped concrete pattern in the walkway around the bocce ball court that typically, according to the consultant, deters skateboarders from running through here and trying to do tricks across the bocce ball courts, because it's not very comfortable to ride on. And then there were the performance shelter options, and I can zoom into these if you'd like, but there were 4 options presented. And just looking at what different ways to lay out and essentially house the performance shelter. These were live models that were scaled, and some of them had more fully wooden facilities. Some of them were metal roofed, though they were paper here, but all of them were of approximately the same size, just different looks. And I didn't have which one received the most votes on that one. So I apologize for that. I thought I had that note here, but I didn't have that vote. So that was the stop sharing here. Those were the items that were reviewed with the public during that open house. We thought we'd have a few more people there, quite a few more people there, but I know that we had staffed up for it, but there really wasn't a whole lot of people that had a whole lot of interest to show up. There was also a concert in the park that night, so that was competing interest there. Yes, Ben, go ahead.
To be honest, I didn't really hear about it much. I don't know if there was different publicity to it or something, but I was unaware of it personally.
Okay.
I don't know if it was the concert, but I feel like the publicity was not there compared to like the previous corresponding events with the sports complex.
I know the open house was sent out on the Gigabyte, which goes to every email subscriber that we have.
Okay.
And I know that every person that's emailed the city about the sports complex in particular is on an email list, and all of those subscribers were directly notified of the open house. So pretty much anyone that tried to engage the city on the open house should have received a specific announcement about it. So the word was definitely out there that this was occurring. So
my conversations with some staff members was that there just wasn't any controversy around it. It was just more of looking for options and details. So unfortunately, controversy draws people in, and daily decision making doesn't. So that's all too often we have meetings where we're talking about details of projects, whether they're more interesting projects like this or less interesting projects like road projects. And when you talk about details, we tend to not get very many people involved. It's just when there's controversial subject.
I understand. And then with the bocce ball courts, the stamped pavement, was there crushed oyster shell at some point in the design element for the bocce ball courts?
Yeah, let me bring that back up. Again, it's kind of hard to see on this small screen, but I'll show you where that's located. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yep.
So all of this area inside the bocce ball court is crushed oyster shells. From what I talked to the designers, the layout of this is that there's just a very thin layer of oyster shells over crushed rock. So they have a compacted bed of crushed rock, creates the base layer, and then there's crushed oyster shells that is 1/2 to 3/4 inch thick layer. That actually shallow layer of oyster shells makes it ADA compliant, because you can roll through it in a wheelchair or have walkers or canes be able to push into that shallow layer successfully and not be a hazard.
So kind of what I was wondering, I was like, is oyster shell like ADA compliant? Is that like a ADA compliant surface?
Yeah, not if you get really deep oyster shells, no.
Gotcha. And so just for my knowledge, I guess, is the entire bocce ball area then all pervious surface with between the stamped, or is that impervious?
This, the area concrete surrounding the bocce ball is impervious. This is just a patterned concrete. So it's not pervious concrete.
It's not like pavers or anything like that?
No, it is not.
Okay. So I guess what is drainage. I know that's an issue we deal with here, and so I guess what
Well,
attention is drainage given?
Well, what we're trying to do is the whole site is already approved. It was approved years ago for having, I think it was 85 or 90% impervious area. So it was approved to be a commercial site with 85 or 90% impervious area. We are by no means going to hit that. So technically we meet all the minimum requirements. We'll be able to have a stormwater pond that's already designed to take all this runoff at 85 to 90% impervious area. We're not going to be putting 85, 90% impervious area. We're putting much less than that. So we are doing low impact development features in some areas. We're going to have some pervious pavements. We're going to have some swales and try and infiltrate some water. But this area is not going to, this area of the pickleball court is not going to be pervious.
Thanks, Jeff. And then let the record know, Will Appleton joined us at, I can't even see the time on that, 5:50.
Apologize for being late.
No worries, totally understandable. So Will, we were just kind of going over the design features of the sports complex and how that open house went for the design features. She showed us, I think you received the email showing the different design elements and stuff like that for the playground. And so we're just kind of going over that. And if you have any questions to tag on, Jeff is here to answer. Matthew.
Yes, Georgine.
Yeah, hi, Jeff. So a couple of questions. Given I'm on the climate change committee and we're talking a lot about adaptation, I think it's important that, and also I owned a school for 37 years, so I'm really familiar with play equipment. So I think it's really important that we have enough shade for the children looking forward. I noticed that last one seems to have perhaps the most shade, but it still is a little bit lacking. Do you have any ideas about how to do that? Of course, the natural shade should be trees, but I don't know, if you're taking them all out in order to get the equipment there. Is there any thought of having trees to give some natural shade in addition to some shade that is actually over the equipment, as in the case of that last one you showed, there was definitely some there. So I had that question.
Okay, I'll start with that question. I'm going to go back and share my screen and show the site layout here. Zoom in a little bit to the play area. Oh, come on, computer. There we go. So I apologize, the brown is actually not chipped wood. The consultant put brown in, assuming it was going to be chipped wood, but it's actually AstroTurf. So we're putting AstroTurf all around the play equipment. There are limited number of trees around it. You can see there's not a whole lot of trees. There's no trees in the parking lot. There's no planting area here between the parking lot and the playground. We're going to look at putting a few more trees in here. This is just the initial concept from the consultant. So we're going to look at putting a few more trees here, but that's about the extent. We don't want to and can't put trees inside the play area. There's lines, and I'll zoom in a little more. It's kind of hard to see, but there's lines in and around all of these pieces of play equipment. You see can you see these white dashed lines? Yeah, so yeah. This is lines that we have to keep clear for ADA compliance. Okay. So we essentially are using every square inch. There's a few areas we're not here and over here and a couple of nooks here, but we're using every square inch of that playground equipment to meet ADA compliance. So the areas we possibly could put trees in are here, here, and maybe if we don't put this full loading, unloading zone here, we could put a tree in here or put some sort of planter. So that's kind of where we're looking at other options.
So you mostly need them on the east and especially on the western side though. So what are these trees that, are they just deciduous trees, the ones that are sort of pink? You've got pink in them and...
Well, you'll have to ignore the actual colors. That's just the artist's rendering of them.
But are they supposed to be the lower canopy or can they be higher canopy so that, or maybe both, so that you know, it's going to take a while with upper canopy if they're new trees to actually get any shade out of them, maybe 10 years or more. This equipment's fairly high. So it's unfortunate that some of the existing trees on that western side can't remain because they would provide a lot of shade for that particular playground.
And the trees you're talking about would remain. You're talking about the native Doug firs.
Yeah, like on the western side of the playground, you know, that,
Well,
yeah, there.
yeah, right here.
Yeah.
So because of the grading that is going to be done to the site, none of the native trees, if you were to leave them here, would survive.
Okay.
Because this is going to be a significant cut here. We're going to lower the grade about 8 feet here, and we're going to fill it about 8 or 9 feet on the other side.
Okay.
And so there is a possibility we could keep 1 or 2 native trees. I don't know where we would, but there's a significant cut here along the parking lot also. We've had lots of discussions about grading on this site. And so it's been a challenge. There's pluses and minuses, of course, to everything you do. And at this point, this is the direction that staff has received to proceed with grading. And if you, the city's code is very specific that if you're anywhere doing any construction within 10 feet of the drip line of any native tree, if you're within that zone, you have to cut the tree down because it's likely to cause some damage to the tree. Right. So if you were to look at the significant trees, and we're going to do this as we proceed in the design, but this is not the time to do that. If you look and see where all the significant trees are, and if you were to plot out where you wanted to save a few of them, it would drastically change the site itself to be able to slope up to the tree or down to the trunk of the tree and stay outside of that drip line plus 10 feet.
Okay, so then getting back to the initial issue, how are we going to provide shade on the equipment for the children?
Well, some of the equipment will be self-shading. Let me go back to compare nature theme. So you can see on this one, tell me if you want me to zoom in.
Yeah, sure.
You can see it, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's natural shade, there's shade built into these options. And that's one thing we have talked about with the consultant at length, is trying to find ways to have shade built into the equipment.
Right, yeah, and probably more than that, I would suggest, especially, yeah, I think more that the one on the top, this is a different rendering then. It's not a rendering of the other, any of the other, doesn't seem similar to the others, and it has no shade at all on the equipment.
Sure. No, I understand that. But again, the intent is to have the consultant provide as much shade as they can using the equipment itself to provide the shade.
Okay.
Did you have any other questions?
Yeah, I did. Okay. So I just asked some people who play pickleball what color they would like, because I don't play pickleball. So just for your input, I know you've picked D, but their choice was B. So just so you know, they said they like colors that blend in with the environment. So that's why they picked that. On the playground, it's unfortunate that you didn't have a lot of people there, because it would be nice to have the families and the children provide some input about what they like. I know the playground at Crescent Creek is really popular, and I don't know if it's because it's that theme of the ocean and boats, but just some feedback to you about that. You know, you want it to be very successful with the children. You want them to really like it. And so I don't know what currently are the hot things for them that they really like to play on. On the shelter, did you say that that's metal on top?
One of the options is to have some of those be metal roof, yes, but some of them are to have either composite or, yeah.
Okay, because they kind of look like glass, but I'm assuming they're not. They wouldn't be glass, no.
It was to differentiate between the wood framing and the roofing
Okay.
material is all that white was for. It was actually, I think it was white, lightweight
Okay.
cardboard.
I got it. And that is it. That was it. Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on the specifics for the detail?
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, Will, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Thank you. No, just a follow-up, I guess, on the tree question. Is it possible to just have a larger caliper tree put in along that west side, Jeff, or is that something that could be considered? I know there's usually a pretty standard size. Maybe there's a larger caliper to accelerate the, get to that height and growth. That's all.
Yeah, I can tell you that we have talked about that as options. What I am told from our landscape architects is the larger caliper tree you install in these situations, the higher likelihood that it will not survive when you transplant it. The smaller caliper trees tend to have higher survivability. So we have options, and you'll notice that a lot of the times you'll see in our projects around town, they are small shrubs, small trees for that reason, so we can have a higher survivability. But we could put some larger caliper trees in there, or faster growing trees, native trees, and see how those fill in. Stephanie.
Oh, hi. Just
Hi.
1 second. Sorry.
It's one of those buttons.
Okay, sorry. I'm back. I had someone ask me about the AstroTurf because there's concern about children getting cancer from AstroTurf fields now. This is kind of a big deal at schools across the country. So I'm sure that's been thought about, but I don't know what the other options are there, but that is a real concern. So.
Sure, that's a good point. I can make available to you, if you'd like, the RCO grant application presentation that we made back in September of 2020. It talks about this specific topic. It's a different kind. It's not crumb rubber, which is been the concern in the past. I'm not going to speak to the science behind it. I just know that there's been a concern. But the city has intentionally gone away from using that crumb rubber for the synthetic turf at this location. The options have been hard rubber, or not hard rubber, firm rubber surface that meets the safety requirements. We have that down at Crescent Creek Park. That causes us a lot of problems. If you've been down there, it cracks easily, it fades easily. It also fills with needles very easily, and it's really hard to get sand and rocks, debris, and other things out of it.
Is that the Pebble Flex surface?
Pebble Flex, yes.
Gotcha.
You can replace it, but it's quite expensive and challenging to replace. They also make those in squares. We did the squares over at Veterans Park. That was another option. It was some guidance in our first round of review comments from our RCO application that led us to recommending the synthetic turf surfacing for the playground equipment. We have wood chips elsewhere, but that's not as easily accessible. So we wanted to make something that was as accessible as possible. And so it came down to either the hard rubber surface or the firm rubber surface or the synthetic turf.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
So it's not full of the little rubber pellets?
No, I forget the name of it. I can look it up and look at the presentation,
Google.
but it's
Google.
yeah. Well, there's a name for it,
Okay.
so I can look up that presentation here in just a second.
No, that's interesting. No, thank you. Georgina, you had another one, right?
Yeah, it reminded me that the problem with synthetic turf used to be lead. So is the lead now out of the synthetic turf? That's not a problem.
That's no longer in the manufacturing process.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, so I'll look it up. I can pull it up on my computer.
It's not a big deal, Jeff.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
The last item I was going to go through was the schedule and a couple other items. Also, some concerns I've heard from members of the public, specific Parks Commission council member. I wanted to address those too. So I'm going to go through those real quick and then talk about schedule, and then that'll be the end of my presentation. So one of the items that I've heard some concerns about has to do with ADA accessibility. And I can bring that image back up of the entire site just as a reference when we're talking here. So let me do that. Okay. Okay, so there's been concern that there's not very much that of this site that's compliant or accessible. And I just want to make sure that we're very clear that there is. There's accessible parking, there's accessible pathways for pedestrians throughout the site. Like I said, everything within the playground equipment is all accessible. There's full accessibility to all the picnic shelters, full accessibility to the restrooms, the bocce ball courts. I think I showed you how you can get in and out of the bocce ball courts if you're in a wheelchair or if you have some disability. Also, the courts, pickleball courts are going to be fully accessible. One of the things we're looking at right now is the stage. There is a walkway, as you can kind of see in the shadows of the trees. There's a hard surface path there. We're looking at having other options. There's also some bulb outs here for that are accessible. We're looking at having a couple of little landing pads in a couple of locations also as options that would be accessible. So we do have every feature of the site is fully accessible, and so I think that will definitely be compliant and successful with all of that. Any questions on accessibility?
Yeah, can you zoom in on the area 13 on the ramp on that side a little bit?
13.
It's on the Harbor Hill Drive side.
Oh, yes. Yes, I will.
So those are all trees buffering the roadway there throughout the path area, right? Those are all?
Yes, those are all newly planted trees. Yeah. You can kind of see the contours. Yeah, as a ramp, it's good. It drops quite a bit. Like I said, it's 9 feet or so, I think, at this far end. Those are the contours, but it'll come down. It'll have landing ramps and then grade ramps, landing and grade and landing.
And that'll be a crosswalk there?
There's already a crosswalk. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a crosswalk here already. 14 is an existing crosswalk between that crosses Harbor Hill Drive right at Swiftwater Elementary.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. Great.
Yeah, so that's already existing. So it'll just tie right into that. One of the things we've been looking at is trying to share parking with Peninsula School District for both directions, but have some sort of shared parking agreement so we can minimize the need for placing additional hard surfaces and trying to retain as much green space and vegetation as possible. So we're just in conceptual talks about it, and everybody's on board that it's a good thing to do, but we need to actually now take steps forward and make that happen. So
is that just like an MOU or something?
Or a formal, yeah, an MOU, some sort of formal agreement, parking agreement between the city and the school district. You know.
Gotcha. That'd be great if we could move forward with that.
Yeah.
So I had one question then on. I just remembered that this is going to be natural turf, right? Not synthetic turf, correct?
Depends on which area you're talking about. The area
from that area, stage, the event.
Yes, the event lawn is going to be natural turf.
Okay, so how is that for accessibility then? I know wheelchairs can handle synthetic turf really well, but how do they handle natural turf, especially the natural turf for the, I look at the natural turf of our other parks and how it struggles a lot and gets a lot of moss and gets very uneven. So
yeah, that's not going to be accessible. That's why I was saying that there's holdouts up here. There's going to be, we're talking about putting a landing pad here, a landing pad here.
Okay.
And it's accessible all around the stage. So we are looking at other places to possibly include a couple of other hard surfaces. That was my reference earlier.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
You bet. Okay. Any other questions on accessibility? Okay. So one other item that I've heard is questions surrounding native plant harvesting. I just want to be clear that we are planning on allowing the public to come in and do native plant harvesting of the areas where we're going to be removing vegetation prior to construction. But we're nowhere near the point where we're ready to do that. We won't know the full scope of the clearing and grading until we get closer to final bid documents, which will be next spring. And so we don't want people coming on the site now and just starting pulling vegetation off, and we look back later and say, oh, actually we wanted that vegetation to be left. But we will know that soon. Well, end of this year, first part of next year. We're going to be looking for that native plant harvesting to occur right before the site is cleared by the contractor. And also now, this time of year is not the time of year to be harvesting native plants. They are not likely to survive if you pull them out of the ground now. So we're going to be, it just fits well into our schedule that we're going to be looking to have the native plant harvesting occur when it's best to remove the native plants, and it's most likely that they will survive. So that's going to be, again, in the late winter, early spring timeframe. Okay. So two last items. One is the schedule. Let me flip to that. You've probably seen our phase 1B schedule. It was included in the packet. There it is here. I can zoom in a little bit. I know it's kind of small. Hopefully that's legible. We are right here. We're in July. The site survey is going to be ongoing. If you've seen surveyors out and around in this area, they've done a massive site survey for the entire sports complex site. So you've seen them over at the Little League, down at the phase 3, along Harbor Hill, Sentinel Loop area. Anyway, they've been all around. We're in the middle of setting up our land use applications. We have not yet submitted land use applications, but we're getting those design details established so we know the site plan itself, and then we can get into the more nuanced design details that most people don't really care about, but it's required for construction. And so we're right here in July. We're going to go into August, continue with all of this. And we're looking to come back to the public and have more feedback in September. So, and then we'll be doing construction until the design until the January, February timeframe. We're going to put it out to bid in February, maybe into March, and then we're going to award a contract in March and then begin construction in April. So it works out quite well timing wise for the weather also. And as part of this, to keep in touch with what we're doing, both public feedback and just general progress on this, I want to make sure that everybody has or is aware of the website, and Josh was referring to it earlier, and I thought I brought it up. I don't know if I did. I'm going to bring it up right now. But we have a website that is dedicated to the sports complex. If you sign up for notifications on that website, you will be updated and notified each time that website is updated. So here I'm going to share my screen in case you haven't seen it, and we can provide also we can provide links to this if you'd like. So hopefully you can see my screen. I can make it a little bit bigger if you'd like, but it's essentially under parks, park planning and projects. There's one called Gig Harbor Sports Complex, and it's, if you go to parks, it's right here on the side of all the parks. It says Sport Complex. But it talks about upcoming meetings. Here's the Parks Commission meeting. And then there's going to be a council study session coming up. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that here in a minute. talks about some background and history, phase 1A, where that is, phase 1B, phase 1B update, which we'll just continue to update that as we proceed. And then it lists out where we've gone through and had public meetings, council meetings on this project. So, yeah, if you just literally, if you just Google Gig Harbor Sports Complex, this webpage comes up, first one. Yes.
Jeff, I can just clarify too. It won't send out a notification every time we update the website, but it will send out a notification every time a meeting is posted or an agenda is posted. And it'll send out a notification whenever we put out an announcement on that webpage. So like when we did the open house, we did an announcement that said we're having an open house, and that'll show up right at the top of this page, and anybody that's subscribed will get that. So
perfect.
If we're just making editorial changes, we don't get a notification sent out for that.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Georgina.
Yeah, so I had one question. You mentioned that the on the schedule that the next open house is September, which I know is what it had been planned. But then there was a study session, and there was concern about the fact they'd go over the 60% mark by September. And I thought that they had advanced that meeting to sometime in August so that it was prior to the 60% mark that it had been reached. Is that not so?
Well, let me just clarify. The study session is with council next week. It's going to be presenting the similar information that I presented tonight. And we're going to be asking council for some input from that point at that study session so we can proceed on to 60%. If your question is, will we be at or beyond 60% by September? No, we won't be.
Oh, okay. So I'm talking about the last study session when it was discussed, and I thought there was some discussion about the fact that it probably would exceed the 60% by September, so therefore they might do it in August. So now you're saying they won't exceed the 60% by that.
I'd be very surprised if they were able to exceed the 60% design. I think we're going to be approaching it in September, but I don't think we'll be past it.
Okay. Right.
Okay. Any questions on that for phase 1B?
I really appreciate the website, and I'm going to get keened in on that. So thank you for that. Whoever's been taking care of that. I look forward to getting the updates on the sports complex and sharing that information.
Yeah, that was Josh, and he set it up for us, and then staff has been updating it. So yeah,
right on. Appreciate that.
Tool to have.
Yeah, always helps with the communication and stuff like that to have that.
Yeah.
Georgina, did you have one more question?
No. Oh, sorry. I didn't get my hand down.
No, no worries. Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
As you're looking at that website, if you see anything that you think is missing or any information that you want on there that we don't have, just let me know and I can adjust it.
Sounds good. Great. Any other questions regarding the sports complex for Mr. Langhill? No? All right. Thanks, Jeff. I don't, do you have another? That's it?
I don't, yeah, I don't. Matt's got everything else covered, I think.
Okay, awesome. Appreciate your time tonight and miss your face.
Yeah, miss the group. All right, take care.
Yeah, that's it. Okay.
All right.
Thanks,
Bye.
Jeff. We're gonna move on to item B, the Parks Commission work plan. So this is an item that has been in the works for quite some time, and was an annual work item that was completed between Parks Commission and City Council, or approved by City Council. And so we've been working on this for, I think, the better part of a half a year now. We kind of put pause on it while we waited for our new members to come in and we get onboarded with the pros plan and the new parks manager. So I think we're at a point now, I think, where we can pick up the discussion now. We got a full Parks Commission, and so we got the draft sent out that we were kind of finessing, I think, is probably where we're at on that one. But it's a great jumping off point. It really outlays the values we had mentioned, the goals of what we wanted in our work plan, what we're pulling off of for the goals and values between the pros plan and the City Council direction. So I don't know, Matthew, do you have something you'd like to add on? What you put together was great. So I do really appreciate that. It really captured what we had discussed really well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, sure, Ben. Thanks Thanks for asking me. I think Josh was going to take some lead here and maybe even the agenda. Josh, did you have something else to cover first? Were the guidelines from council on the agenda?
Oh, yeah, that's item B on the agenda, Ben. I think we skipped over.
Oh, I must have the old agenda.
Yeah,
I
it got
apologize.
skipped, and I just didn't want to go out of order.
I'm sorry. I have the old agenda pulled up. Yeah. Okay. So item B is the city council's the A through, is it A through F, the roles?
No, I think, Ben, you asked for further time on if there was.
Oh, gotcha.
On policy.
Yeah, I think this is what Georgina had discussed with me in discussing the roles a little deeper.
Right.
So, yeah. So Josh, in our last meeting, we had discussed our roles and with the city council's designation of what our roles are and how are those outlaid and the policy that outlays those. And so I think Georgina had asked for a little more clarification. So I don't know if Josh, you want to start, or if Georgina, you just want to swing right off the bat, or?
Either way.
I don't really have anything more to add, but I'm happy to answer, any confusion or questions or whatever direction you want to take it is fine with me.
All right, Georgina, go ahead. And I don't know if you anything specific, but.
Yeah, I don't want to flog a dead horse, but I did appreciate the lengthy explanation last time. But, things start to sink in, and then also you start to apply some of these things, and then you have more questions. So you did mention that you wanted to hear from us if we had those questions. So that's why I decided that maybe this would be a good time. So it's just that I guess it's like a philosophical reversal. So when you said, oh, you're not used to this, it is different. It's a bit more than different. It's extremely different. So, and I do understand about, not wanting a serial meeting or, get to a quorum. I understand all that. And I think that that's what we were all very aware of anyway. So this to me is a little bit like an employee handbook. I used to write employee handbooks, and I used to implement them, and I trained managers on how to implement them. And they were legal documents, and they always had to be updated. I used to have to keep going to legal seminars to make sure they were completely updated. And so one thing I learned about that is you didn't want to have ambiguous language. And so things like in general, that then you have to explain an awful lot when you have something that you're generalizing about. And so keeping it specific is very important. And so also they should be written for clarity, and also not written for like the one-off that might happen that probably never has happened or did happen one time. And that's when the document, I think, becomes a little unwieldy and even a little oppressive. And so I think that was probably perhaps what triggered Stephanie to reflect that we could wind up with no one wanting to serve in the commission because they don't feel like they have a voice. So I think it's very important that we not load it up in that regard, that it's also one-sided and you can't talk to anybody now. And this is the feeling you get when you actually read the document, not necessarily from your explanation, but the document should stand alone. It should be very clear as to where we stand on things like that. And also to Will's point, that we want to strategize more with Matthew and get that direct feedback. I feel that if Matthew doesn't feel he has the information that we're asking for, that he would immediately either direct us or he would forward it to somebody who he feels could better answer it. I came on board at the Parks Commission so that I could learn more about the planning and operational perspective, because I already understand parks from a public perspective. And so I honestly don't see how I can maximize my learning if I'm having to ask you, Josh, as the staff liaison, questions that you can't really answer, but I know that Matthew can, because I know Matthew's expertise and his job description, and I'm not quite understanding why that can't happen. There just they're just sometimes philosophical talks about parks, and I find it very helpful. I don't see that that's going behind, you know, the Commission's back, and I think other commissioners might have done the same thing. So I mean, I think we also understand quite well what questions he can answer. I mean, because he's been around now since early January. So that's, and that sort of goes with the municipal code. I like the municipal code. I had read that before I became a Parks Commissioner. And I understand from that more clearly, actually, than what I now understand with this new document, you know, as to what is important for Parks Commissioners in the role that they play. So that's my biggest issue. But I also have some issues with 5.17 and 5.18. So 5.17 states unequivocally members should not represent themselves as advisory board members. And then with Louise's new language, in a position of authority in the city, unless they have specifically been directed to do so by the advisory board in consultation with the staff liaison. So you did explain, you sort of expanded on that, and you said what I think it was intended to say is that you should not go out and represent yourself as a Parks Commissioner in public in a way that's not appropriate. And then you said that that's not to say you can't talk to your friends and neighbors, letting them know what's happening on the Parks Commission and getting their thoughts. That's absolutely appropriate, which I think complies with the municipal code as I read it. So I just want to be sure when I converse with members of the public, which I do very often, if it's okay that they know I am sharing my opinion as a Parks Commissioner, or am I to say that it's my own personal opinion and not my opinion as a Parks Commissioner, which sounds a bit weird because to me it's one and the same thing. In thinking about the idea of sharing my own personal opinion, I realized that there is nothing in Article 5 that says I can even share my personal opinion with the public if I'm a Parks Commissioner. So I've looked at other cities' guidelines and procedures for advisory boards and committees just to see what they do. I haven't checked them all, but the ones I checked, they weren't like, they didn't have the same feeling as ours at all. And they did have language that would say that you as advisory board members could communicate and share their own opinions because they understand that we aren't always going to agree on everything. So, you know, it's kind of like very democratic with a small d, you know, and I'd like to see this to be a bit more democratic with a small d because it feels rather onerous and a bit oppressive right now. So on 5.18 or 5.18, communications with other advisory board members, it states advisory board members should not communicate with other members of the same advisory board on official advisory board business outside of their meetings. Such communication should be directed towards staff liaisons who can inform other board members as necessary in advance of the next meeting. So, you know, that just feels kind of onerous too. And, you know, I brought up an example of when Stephanie and I were interested in creating an interest board at Shore Park about Clarence Shaw because nobody knows that it's named for him. And so what would cause you to say, no, you can't talk to Stephanie about that? I'm just curious, like, no, is this something that you'd say, well, Georgina and Stephanie have to have this conversation at the Parks Commission meeting? You know, they can't have that conversation to kind of explore the idea. I think the way I see it is we would, you know, come up with an idea that we talk about, and then we present it at the Parks Commission meeting to say, we think this would be a good idea. What do you think? You know. So anyway, those were my questions and concerns. I have been with a public group recently and they asked me questions about the master plan for Crescent Creek Park. And I was like, oh, what do I do now? And then I just said, Well, this is my personal opinion. I'm not speaking as a parks commissioner, but it felt kind of weird to say that because my parks commissioner's opinion is going to be the same as my personal opinion, I assume. So anyway, I just wanted to share that.
So yeah, there's a lot of philosophical questions in there, which I'm unfortunately really can't answer because the philosophical part of this is coming from the city council. So I would agree that these can be worded better. And I think the next time that council reviews these, we'll take a look at that and see if we can make it a little clearer for you. I don't think they're intended to be draconian at all. So I don't think it's supposed to be like you can never let anyone know you're on the Parks Commission, and it's not anything as severe as that. I think the intent here is we have had issues on more than one occasion, more than a few occasions where some of our advisory board members have gone out and represented themselves inappropriately in the community, saying, this is the position of the city, this is the position of my board, and it creates an issue for the city. So it was kind of meant to deter that. So I think we can word that better, and I can work with council on that when we take up these rules next time. But the intent behind these is a philosophical intent that is coming from the city council. The city council, I'm sure you're all aware that 3 of the council members are former parks commissioners, and the mayor is a former parks commissioner, and our city administrator is a former parks manager who worked with parks commissions and other commissions, and they are very aware of some of the issues that they have had to deal with commissions in the past. And I think this is a result of that. So it may come across as being forceful. I don't think that was their intent to do that. I think they just identified some needs that they wanted, some issues they wanted to address, and this is the result of that. This is the first time we've adopted something like this, so I'm sure there can be much more massaging and editing to make it more clear what council's intent is. But I can't really speak for council's intent and what their philosophical reasons are for these, other than to say that I know that they've discussed them at length in their study sessions, and this is what they wanted to communicate. So yeah, I know it will come up again, and it's something that we will keep working on, but that's about all I can offer at this point, I think.
So is this an annual review, or is this like every 3 years type of review type of deal?
Well, I think we will probably end up reviewing parts of the council guidelines. I don't know if we'll review this part again this year, which will be our second time this year, but it's really up to council. When they see needs to amend something, we'll take a look at it and open it up and start making revisions.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So say Georgina wanted to petition for a change, she would need to start talking to council when?
If there's something you want to see changed in this document, go ahead and send an email to the council and say what you have an issue with, and council can address it. If it's something they want to bring up.
Okay. Georgina, you're on mute.
What about, the example I'm giving of talking to people who ask me about the master plan of Crescent Creek? So I obviously can give my personal opinion, right?
That's fine to give your opinion, and you can let them know you're on the Parks Commission and this is what you're saying in the Parks Commission meetings. But I think the caution would be, just don't say that this is what the Parks Commission believes and this is what the Parks Commission is going to do and this is what the Parks Commission is going to tell council to do, when the commission hasn't done that yet.
No, well,
that wouldn't be an issue.
Plan on doing that.
Yeah, it wouldn't be an issue with this type of thing, but it is an issue with other things that some of our other boards deal with. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Georgina, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, this was, it was different. It's a change. And so obviously there's some things to be fleshed out. And so you're always so thoughtful, and, and so thank you for putting the time and energy into thinking about this and how it affects us and you. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hopefully we can, get our voices in the right ear, and we'll see a change to that in the coming future or something.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't see why not. I mean, but who knows? New council in 3 years or 2 years, whatever it might be. Okay, so any other questions for Josh regarding the council guidelines for advisory boards? This is new, so
and I'm
feel
always
free
happy
to
to take
give them
any
feedback.
emails or calls. Just let me know if you have any questions about it. I can
Absolutely.
happy to help.
Yeah, clarification or anything like that, feel free to reach out to Josh. Or if you just want to vent to him. So thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, Stephanie.
I have a question about all this, because I think Georgina brought up a really important point, that there are times when we need to ask Matt a question. And I guess, Joshua, it would be helpful for us to better understand what are the typical kinds of things that we can talk to him directly about.
I don't have a problem with you going directly to Matt if you have a question about, something parks related that Matt's dealing with. That's fine. What I need to know, just as the liaison, is if you're discussing something that needs to go before the whole commission, or something that's going to affect the commission, something that's going to be part of your work plan, bigger picture topics like that. It's helpful for me to stay informed on those, so that Matt's not working on something that I'm not aware of that needs to be happening on the agenda. It's just a communication thing at that point. But if you just have a question about, hey, what's going on at this park, and it's not something that's going to come up before the whole committee at the next meeting, then yeah, just go ahead and reach out to Matt.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate that. All right, go back to the other agenda item that I tried to touch on before I screwed things up. Agenda discussion item letter C, Parks Commission work plan. So like I said, this is something that's been in the works for a little while. Matthew was so great at putting together a draft that we can kind of work off of and refine a little better. It has some general ideas, actually some really great ideas that have been in previous work plans and through the previous meetings. So Matthew, are you able to share that for us, or Josh?
Yeah, I have it pulled up. I can share it.
Josh, be careful if you're bringing it up. You may have that overlap table, which maybe you hopefully don't, but I cleaned up my version.
Oh, okay. If you can email that to me, Matt, I'll pull it up and then I can edit along with everybody. I think I do have one where it looks like the tables are overlapped.
Yeah, sure. I'll email it to you right now.
Okay.
But it is really just meant to represent the work of the commission. I hope the commissioners were able to, at least despite the overlap, see that your ideas and your values and everything were reflected there. Things that are missing are really important for us to hear at the city, so that we can give you a full, broad document to evaluate. I know Josh and I talked a little bit about maybe a focus today on some budget issues and about how to prioritize, but I think it's really important that you start with everything. So it seems a little bulky, but really we're talking 4 pages of a table, 1 page with some very wordy introductions, but I hope in some ways those definitions help people and be able to say, I know what I'm looking for when I turn to the work program. The work program this year should look a lot like it has in the past. One of the highlighted features is that last column where commissioners are able to assign priority levels. And you could do that individually, and we'll talk more about that in just a little while if that's appropriate. But I'll just say that that format should be looking familiar. What is new is a column that speaks to code reference, meaning this comes from the municipal code. And letters A through F happen to be something you're all familiar with from our exercise, but those are A through F are duties assigned to the commission by the code. And so sometimes when we talk about, one example in the work program is park evaluation, what does that have to do with? I made the assertion that it had to do with all those letters, A through F, through the duties assigned to the Parks Commission to help with parks evaluation. And then the other thing that it might show is if this was coming from a PROS plan. So the PROS plan is listed as a P number 1, meaning PROS plan goal number 1 or 3 or 4. And I hope it's clear to all that we work from the PROS plan and that all our goals, policies, values from staff and from the Parks Commission need to be consistent with the PROS plan. It doesn't mean you can't have your own ideas. It just means you can't talk about inconsistent things like roller coasters through the wetlands. You can't do that. So that said, we tried to show where the code references, the goals value was, or if it was a goal of the commission or a value. I happen to have put those, I think, on page 4. Basically, it was saying, these are the things that you've brought up that maybe reflect your own goals and values as commissioners and your terms with us. We did say that you could look ahead to all the way to 2025, knowing that some of you are fresh on the commission with 3-year goals. So I think Josh may have just gone to the last page to show goals and value-based projects. This list that it doesn't come from the duty, it comes from a value you've expressed or a goal. And I hope that's clear. Some of those examples include let's see, Old Burnham Properties feasibility, land and long use plan visioning. I call that one up here because that's actually a tie over from your old work programs. It's really not directed from our PROS plan to do that, if you asked me. And so I wanted to speak to it being really a representative of value you've expressed as a commission, public access to open space. You could say that's a PROS plan, but I don't have a PROS goal for that. Again, it has to be consistent with PROS anyways. I decided to put it here under value. You can always arrange these things in ways you're comfortable. But anyway, I know Josh wanted to introduce a prioritization, I think, with a budget realization that we've got some budget deadlines. So I should let him speak to what he thinks we need to do.
Yeah, well, I guess I just wanted to talk timing wise about the implementation of a work plan. So as you go through this list, you'll see there's a number of things, and we kind of want to keep these into 2 separate categories. They're not really sorted by that yet, but a lot of these things have an expenditure tied to them. They're going to be projects that are budgeted, they'll be included in our 2023-2024 budget. And those things, anything that goes into the 2023-2024 budget is going to be de facto a Parks Commission work plan item. And since we are only now just less or almost 2 months away from posting that new budget, I think what we want to do is isolate those things that we know are going to be in the budget that we can put into our work plan automatically. So when we go through this list and we talk about things that are going to have a cost associated with them, like doing a plan or bringing on a consultant or something that's going to have that, we're going to want you to prioritize those so that staff knows how to implement those into the budget and whether it's a priority to get it into the budget. And then once we get to that point, then we'll know this is going to automatically be on your work plan because it's something staff's going to do and staff's going to come to you for your input on it. The other things on here are the things that don't really have a budget item that are more things that we do with staff time or with Parks Commissioner time. And those we'll want you to prioritize as well, so we know what you want to focus on outside of the things that are actually going to cost us money. So the process for this is, I think we're going to try to get through this list, hopefully most of it today, and get some kind of feedback and prioritization on it. And then when we come back in probably not the August meeting, but the September meeting, we'll have a draft of the city's proposed budget for parks, for operations, for planning. We can bring that to you at the September meeting. And then on October 1st, that meeting or that budget goes public to the council and the public and everything's out there. So once we get that out in front of council and the public, what the mayor is recommending for the budget, then I think at that October meeting, when we come back for the Parks Commission, we'll be ready to tie a bow around this work plan and say, here's all the proposed budgeted items that we're going to be on our work plan. Here's all the non-budgeted items, and we can put it all into one cohesive document. The timing of that is ideal for us because at that time, once that budget is released to council on October 1st, we're going to go to council in study session and for the entire budget and say, these are all of the budget items. This is our reason for having it in there. This is the justification. And we can actually carve out a time to go over all of the parks items in a study session with council. And it's the perfect time to go over the entire Parks Commission work plan at the same time. So that's kind of the timing that we're hoping we can do. I know you guys have been working on this for a long time, and I hate to push it off a little bit longer, but I think it makes sense to do it that way, because then council will have a really firm, concrete document in front of them in the budget that says, these are the things that we know are going to cost money, and here they are. And then we can add on to that, these are the things that won't cost money that we think we'll have time to do. So as we go through each of these, and I'll have Matt just kind of go through the list, how he wants to introduce them. That's, I think, what we want to keep in mind is we're going to figure out what needs to be in the budget for the next 2 years, and then what additional things we want to do. So does that make sense? Is that kind of?
It does, and I appreciate you making sure, attempting to make sure it coincides with the budget, because I know that's issues we run into before. And hey, we're creating a work plan that the budget's already been approved on. So it's like, okay, yeah. How is this prioritizing the Parks Commission? It's not. We're just kind of picking up work where, in a budget that's already approved. So making sure it coincides with the budget and proposing that proposal time period, it works out really well.
Okay. Yeah, then I would just recommend have Matt go through each of these items, and he can, explain if you need more explanation and get your feedback. And I think the recommendation, and I haven't been around for your other processes, is just to kind of rank things high, medium, low, and try to get a value assigned to each.
Right. Well, thanks, Josh. The commission, thank you for your patience with the document already. It's hard to read on screen in the middle of this, and you got it late. So I don't want to assume we're really ready to do all of the review tonight. I do support Josh's strategy to really think about what's critical for council to hear. And so to that effect, I think tonight it'd be good for me to talk it out and hear your questions. The voting, so in that column, I would suggest people do that on their own, not having to be influenced by everybody else's votes. And the way to do it, in my opinion, and I shared this with Katrina, our city administrator, is to really give yourself the challenge of saying, I have equal number of high priority, middle, and low priority items. If you remember in that last column, right now you just have number symbols. And that's meant to show how many commissioners considered it a high priority, how many considered medium and low. It's kind of that's the way we formatted that in the past. So the top box of this document says Park Commissioner priority ratings, high, medium, and low. And I just highlighted a 700. It's not your true numbers, but 7 commissioners in that example would have said that was a high priority, and 0 gave it medium or 0 for low. And this would really show strong message to the council, obviously, and to the community, that the Park Commission really feels strongly about the park evaluation aspects of your job. I'm not suggesting it should get a 7-0. I'm telling you to equally spread out your high, medium, and lows. So you're going to have to be careful. If you look down the list, I think you're going to find that there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 26 choices. So it's something along the lines of, I have 8 to vote high, 8 to vote medium, 8 to vote low. I would suggest that be homework. To Josh's point, I would focus on this first page, but I think to help illustrate what he's talking about with budgeted items, this first page and the example spoken about park evaluation, it's not really a budgeted item except for the idea that there is outreach to be done. There's an evaluation tool, which we've already designed, the Google tool that Luis has been promoting. These things are not necessarily budget items. These are items that maybe speak to your priority and for council to see that you have an interest in playing that role. There are related items under park evaluation, and one is park standards. Again, that came up in your meetings. It is in the pros plan, but I referenced it here as an item that you could suggest a year for and a priority level. And that's not necessarily a budget item, but a statement of its importance. And then mayor and council can direct staff if we're going to work on that, or if we're going to make it a public discourse item through the Parks Commission. So this first page speaks to large, broad goals, essentially work plan items that probably aren't budget related. The second one down is local recreation access improvements. Again, consistent with the pros plan, we said that we will always look for increased local recreation access and improvements to it. here you have a chance to say that this is what you think as a commission you should really be focusing on, like helping find those. That could translate in a couple of different ways. The objective you have in front of you is ensure local recreation access in an equitable manner. So I would have you look through these and realize that some of them are really defining what you think is important from a Parks Commission for your role, for something that needs to happen in the community, maybe sometimes through staff, whereas your objective is just to ensure it happens. I guess I'll just stay on the page, but we'll get to a budget item in just a moment. These are non-budget. Capital improvement program of the PROS plan. There was the objective expressed by the commission that you would be able to look at the capital improvement program. You might remember that's the 6-year projection of capital cost needs that is in the PROS plan. Well, we try to incorporate that into our biannual budget. It used to be annual budget, but now biannual. So this objective is to say that you might be able to investigate cost saving concepts and implementation strategies on those capital projects. That's a really important voice from the community about helping decide priorities of capital projects. It is a council decision, but it ties us back to the PROS plan and to the budget on a biannual process. I think I will skip the other two and go down to the next page. I wanted this page, I think the thing I've been anxious to show you is the second item listed, a work item, is coordination of environmental protection, enhancement, and sustainability efforts in parks. And I thought that was an important focus. We were talking broadly, but really your item would be focusing on parks. Now, parks include open space management, and it does include forestry, so it's all still relevant, your larger considerations. But as a commission and as a staff person helping support the commission, I'd say that our efforts are focused on what's going on in our park system. But our budget item, that's the smaller item below, the recycling program in parks. This is an example of something that, if per Josh's direction, we would call out now, maybe color it and say, this is a budget item we need to decide on for its priority level, and suggesting it to council. They already had it in the budget. That's why it's there now. It doesn't necessarily guarantee that we will have a recycling program in the next budget. We haven't yet done one in this year. So you have to make a weigh in on, does that seem important? So that's a budgeted item that may be worthy of its own analysis of high, low, medium. Maybe we do that with just budgeted items. The Cushman Trail expansion, that's another one that's just on this page that shows as a little dot insert. Well, that goes along with coordinating non-motorized transportation work. So the Cushman Trail expansion, a budgeted item, it's shown there with you having the job to assist with regional coordination for the Cushman Trail. We could change the wording of that. You guys have a charge in your duties to do regional coordination, but you could also be, if it wasn't assist with, it might be something along the lines of advocate for. And I think Josh would probably like some time, and maybe Katrina too, to see where some of the ways to focus the best wording here is. But I hope I'm giving you a sense that those smaller items, recycling and Cushman Trail, those are budgeted items. Wilkinson Barn stabilization on this page as well. That shows up in the city's 6-year budget. It's kind of starts underway in 23 with some study monies. So I thought it was important to go ahead and capture it. I did my very best to make sure that any program that council has budgeted and planned for shows up on this work plan for your evaluation. The same thing on the next page where it says donation list for parks. That probably isn't much of a budget item, but it's a budget implication. It's about having a policy and a program so that people can actually donate either small funds or really maybe an amenity at a time to us, and particularly if they meet our standards. I'll pause and see if you guys are following.
There is one thing I wanted to mention, going back to your comment about the Old Burnham properties, not necessarily being a PROS plan matter, but in the PROS plan, it was very highly rated that people wanted additional open space with trails. So right. I would think it does fit there actually.
Yeah, thank you, Georgina. And I caught myself in talking about it like,
Okay.
oh, that is access to open space, and that. But I think I just had a hard time classifying it under goals 1 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 of the PROS plan. But it's, I think if you buy into the idea that everything here is consistent with a PROS plan, it's worthy of consideration. I think maybe I could, or we could put under the that column that speaks about, is it a code duty? Is it a PROS goal? We could elaborate and try to do a more fleshed out job there. I think if you found it on the first or second page, it's already considered likely fully supported by the PROS plan. But I went on later to do, per Ben's instruction, a page that's really about the PROS plans and how we might go as you might go as a commission, ensuring things of the PROS plan are followed. Why don't we actually skip down to that, Josh, so people can see that page?
I would recommend that Old Burnham go on to the PROS plan section.
Okay, good plan. So if we don't mind, if you could scroll down just a little bit more, Josh. Oh, I guess that's the last, where you should see a blue heading that says PROS plan. Oh, well, there we go. Thank you. Yeah, we were actually on that page. I'm sorry. So this page could obviously have the Old Burnham properties on it and alignment, and we could find one of the goals particularly to call out. What we had previously done is I had shown it as a value, I believe, of the Parks Commission. I'm not sure, but we could bring it, that value as well, into that third column. So I think one of the challenges you'll probably face is having to choose what's a low priority. I mean, these are all noble projects and each of them has been supported in your meetings. I think they'll probably, if I had to do it, I'd have a hard time with that. But I think as we accumulate them, we'll see trends that are important to communicate to the council. I think you will be talking about role of the commission, even though you've got the exact duties, you know that the duties give you latitude for things to study, things to recommend on. And so with that said, I think you'll have some direction as to which things you'll say are important, and then as they respond, concurrence ideally. And then that gives you that working plan for 20, maybe it's an annual plan at a time, but it gives you that strong foundation that, hey, we looked at everything of our interest and our purview to date.
So are we looking to have 1/3 on each of the, in ranking them? Are you looking at like 1/3 high, 1/3 medium, 1/3 low, or?
Yes, well said, Georgina. Yeah.
Okay.
And the thing is we often say you have homework, but we'd really need this done. I don't know if Josh is suggesting August or September, but we would definitely need you to do it ahead of the meeting. So given that it's budget time, all of us do have a little homework and we need to get on that.
So
I need to give you an easier copy to get through too.
yeah, Matt, when you're saying this stuff is tied to the budget, you're talking about next year's budget? Or are there things in this work plan that are in the 2022 budget that need to be addressed?
They are in the 22 budget. Stephanie, and up to this year, we were doing annual budgets. So these are already established budget items. And you could anticipate that they're going to happen this year. I can't say that we will do a recycling program this year. It's something I've investigated a little bit, and it needs more prioritization from City Council and from Commission. It's a budgeted item, so I think Council's spoken, but it also has been a budget item for every year for the past few years, and staffing hasn't been sufficient is one of the reasons. Mm-hmm. But to answer your question, these are budgeted items from the at least the 22 year.
So would you say that when we go through to rank these, high would be something to get done in the remainder of 2022, medium 23? I mean, is that what you're
I wouldn't say that specifically, Stephanie, because as I have to sometimes remind myself and the commission, we're not in a position to direct city work. you're just able to say this is a really high priority, not really that it needs to be 2022. I think that's implicit because it's already a budget item and you said high, so it's kind of implicit that you still really care about it, but really you're focused on having a logical or at least prioritized list of items that are important work that you can do. And I would say like basically valuing the recycling program is good because it's a budgeted item, but the overall product of the work program is for us to get to your priorities, like all those other tasks and things that might be important to you. Park master planning is listed there, revisiting the park master plans as needed, anticipating coordination needs, advice on stakeholders. You're not going to be able to do everything on this list throughout the whole year, every year. So it is about telling us about your highest priorities so that they do make your work program, or at least the draft.
Right.
Council will then approve the work program and they may take some things off and say, you know, that item is covered by another group, natural conservation protection, open space management, you know, thank you, but we have a climate advisory group, thank you, but we have expertise in public works that deal with this stuff, and that's their purview to say.
Yeah, I guess where I'm going with this is I'm trying to figure out what is actually like on the work plan for this year so that we're not doubling up on things that are already in motion that we don't even, you know, that are, like I said, they're already in motion. They're going to happen. So
yeah.
Do we need to make that a priority?
I wouldn't, Stephanie, I wouldn't put it on this list if it was a no question already done item.
Okay.
I have the Crescent Creek master planning and that is just about under contract. But the truth is, you know, it could get slowed down too. But I would just say that the things on here are items in the balance.
Okay. Well, because, and then along those lines, I guess the other question I have is, we have a couple of different master plan / visioning type of activities. And I realize that some of that stuff is done in phases. So there's sort of step 1, step 2, step 3 in that process. And so I guess the question is, when we prioritize that, are we prioritizing for individual sites? You know, because it's hard to do visioning for 3 sites in 1 year, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not, I don't know. But
right.
It seems like that's somewhat difficult.
Yeah, Stephanie, I would suggest that if there's another site that needs consideration in the next 1, 2, or 3 years, it needs to be on this list. I didn't put all historic sites on this list. I put Wilkinson Barn stabilization because that's been discussed as a budgeted item in the past.
Okay. Yeah, well, I was just thinking Crescent Creek, Wilkinson Barn, there was some talk about Shaw Park. There's a few things like that that are in the scope that are kind of in the works, but at some point you got to kind of pick one and run with it, right?
Yeah, and some of that latitude, if you feel like we started broadly enough, and we can always add some lines here, but if we started broadly enough and you gave enough direction and council concurred, then staff we got our direction. It doesn't mean we got our marching orders. It just means we got really good direction on what's important. And you get a chance to give some oversight to how we do with that, but not direct, because that's the mayor's job.
Mm-hmm.
That's ultimately how this will play out. You'll develop your work plan, which will be a combination of what's in the budget and the non-budgeted things you want to see, and then you'll be able to give your prioritization rank to those things. You know, which are the most important to you. But ultimately, and even for council, this is true. It's going to be carried out in whatever way it works for the mayor to direct it to be carried out. So there's going to be things that are really important to some people that just for whatever reason, logistically, the mayor has to put on hold and staff has to work on something else. And that'll be the ultimate decision maker on what gets done. But the input that you can give on what your priorities are will be valuable to making that decision.
Yeah, I think just to clarify one last thing, I think Stephanie, just if you weren't there already, we call this a work program. It's a little bit of a misnomer in that regard because you don't physically do work, right? And my work isn't based on this program. This is kind of like a work guidance and prioritization from the public. and a process that ultimately reaches the mayor. It gets negotiated with council, and you get to find out what they really do appreciate of your priorities and would like you to focus on.
I got a couple of questions for you there, Matthew.
Yeah.
I know some members are fairly new. If they're unfamiliar, you want them to reach out to you, to Josh, to me, with specific projects. I know like the Old Burnham Drive one, you know, is one that comes to mind. And then with the, was the Cushman etiquette signage included in that? I know isn't that a budgeted item?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that one up, Ben. I did not put that on there, and that's my somewhat oversight, but I'll just admit that I talked about the Cushman etiquette signage with some predecessors here, and then we decided it wasn't a very clear project. Maybe it's more clear to you, and I would like that, but I think what I wanted to do as a staff person was to talk to you most directly, Commission and the public, obviously, but about a sign program and about sign. When I say program, you try to have different scaled signs for different purposes, and they wouldn't be contained just to the Cushman Trail. So I hope it wasn't just a caught me thing, but you're right. It's been a budgeted item, but it had confusion, so I didn't put it in.
Okay.
And I probably need to be more careful than that and actually get you a draft back that does have the etiquette signage. It's a small project, but nonetheless, maybe it was important to you, Ben, or others. So I'll try to get that back into the draft.
Yeah, it was just a discussion we had with previous Parks commissioners about the onset of electric bicycles and scooters and stuff like that, and creating, you know, some safety standards for those, because I mean, those go fast.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that back up.
The other one I had was with the BMX portion of the Crescent Creek Park.
Mm-hmm.
Is that regarding specifically what the BMX track would look like in that specific park, or how that may be mitigated with the visioning process, if that's a use that is going to be lost, or can that be a use used in other parks?
Yeah, thanks, Ben, for bringing it up. It actually gets us back to this page, which I should have introduced you to. But this is continuing a review of funded capital projects. Maybe the word funded should go away, because BMX bike playground pump track is not quite funded, at least not that I recall. Maybe a feasibility study did have some money, but nonetheless, I have listed projects that should represent the capital projects to date that the commission would have a chance to review at milestones. What I wrote here was formulate a plan in coordination of the master plan. It doesn't necessarily mean it would be in the master plan for Crescent Creek. It would just be done in coordination, because that's one of those questions that has to be answered during the Crescent Creek master planning process.
Like whether or not that use is still in that park, or if it's going to be like a mitigating type deal. Is that?
I don't use the word mitigating on that one.
Okay, replacement.
But I would just say, like, it would be a consideration as to, is this the right place for this? Is this a good place for this? What's the ideal program place for such a thing? It will come up during Crescent Creek, but it is its own subject. Mm-hmm. The third item on the list of capital projects is the Crescent Creek visioning for the park and for the Masonic Lodge. So you can see that I separated those in part, Ben, because both of those could be capital leading projects.
Okay.
And it doesn't specify like, oh, because you're going to spend money on the BMX bike. If you want to advocate that as a budget item, we should probably highlight that row and say, there should be some money on this thing. It's been talked about for so long. There should be maybe more study than just in coordination with the master plan. I put it as something we're going to resolve in 2023 with the Crescent Creek master plan.
Okay, I have a question then. Because my eye went to that one too. And so it is one of several amenities at Crescent Creek. So why would you be looking only at that one amenity as opposed to the sand volleyball and
Ball field.
yeah, ball field. Yeah, I mean, we don't have much information on the ball field and how much it's used. So there's, you know, the one thing I'm kind of getting here is I can look at these and I can say, God, there's so much I don't know about that particular thing. So for me to rank it becomes a little problematic. When I look at something as an example, I look at something I really do know about, and that's Shore Park. Then I say, well, there's not a lot of information there for other commissioners to actually look at to understand what the problems are with Shore Park. So
sure.
I'm feeling that way about a lot of these things when I look at them, and I'm thinking, well, I don't know what I would rank that because I just don't have enough information about it. And when I look at the period of time, like I believe work plans used to be annual. I think that was a lot easier. But now when I look at a period of time of 2022 to 2023 or, you know, 25, it's like, okay, why are we ranking them now? If this is halfway through 2022,
right?
Something is a 2022 to a 2025. Shouldn't that be a low priority this year, since something else is obviously going to be a bigger priority? And maybe we need guidance as to which of the things on this list are truly a top priority for the half of a year that is remaining for 2022.
Yeah, and so your work program, I got a couple things to address here and hopefully make improvements on. Your work program is coming late in 2022, and so truly, I think with Josh's kind of suggestion too, you're aligning with the 23 budget. The 22 year is not over. It's not like give up on it, but I would just tell you, like, don't try to manage this thing down to what has to happen in 2022. The second thing I think I've realized in this conversation, which is very valuable, is the continuing review of park projects is important. And I think you should rank that as a priority 1, 2, or at the top, the first row of this table. The individual items underneath, in hindsight, I don't think we should be voting on those and ranking those projects, because they are part of where, as you were starting to get at, I think some of you, what's the setting? Is it time for a study? Is it time for a BMX bike playground or not? So I think we should probably send you a revision of this without voting on the individual capital projects, because they are not prioritized in the work program. You might recall that your capital projects have been prioritized in the PROS plan already. So I'm seeing the error in listing voting of those individual items. And I don't mean to pick on a project, but it really would be inappropriate if you guys put Crescent Creek Visioning at a low level right now while I'm getting the contract underway with HPP.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So I take it back. I don't want you to vote on the capital project priorities. 1, because you've done it through the PROS plan, and 2, it's really not appropriate. I hope that really helps. I'll just say that, Georgina, you asked about why volleyball is not on there. BMX bike playground and pump track have been talked about. Now, this is before my time here, and Ben might be able to collaborate, but it's been talked about as its own item for study, and it's not necessarily been a capital project for Crescent Creek. We could definitely say in another time, there are other elements of Crescent Creek Park, like volleyball. I know, Georgina, sometimes you call them amenities that need a place. We could talk about needs. We do that in the PROS plan. What you got here were capital projects that have already been identified, and BMX bike just happens to be one of them. It didn't mean at Crescent Creek. It meant we should have one of those in the city. And so it's gotten budget consideration in the past.
Now, in the PROS plan, if you're going to look at the PROS plan to help guide us, then it was scored really low. Is that not something we should be concerned about?
Well, I think it still made it into the capital program, though, the 6-year program. If I'm not mistaken. And if it didn't, then it may not belong on this list. Because what this list should represent are capital projects that have already been endorsed by commission and council.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
if these are
So we're
budgeted
cleaning this
capital
thing
projects,
up, and all of this input is actually going to make a better product. So I'm glad we're talking about it. I hope it's not too laborious.
if these are budgeted capital projects, there's really no reason to rank them because these are things that staff is going to do and you will be involved in them. So they're going to happen the way they're going to happen. So
Josh, I think you're right that these are capital projects that have been endorsed, but just to clarify, they haven't been budgeted. They're not all budgeted, but that's not the commission's job to prioritize, I don't believe, these capital projects because we did it in the pros plan.
So you're going to send us an updated list?
Yeah, I'm gonna, yep. And if there's projects that I should have listed capital projects, I hope I won't miss them. I'm looking at the capital program from the pros plan right now. And I thought I had done this thoroughly, but I'm wondering if the Civic Green has playground equipment upgrade. That might be something that I should have put in this as an example. Master planning for Harbor Hill open space. I don't believe I listed here. I do have it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But I do want to be sure that I didn't drop off things that have had pros consideration already as a capital project.
Mm-hmm. So it's slightly off the topic, but not entirely. Shaw Park is on the screen right now. So I have been out there and along the path, there is not really a tree that is either alive or in good shape that is outside of about 40 feet from Borgen. And also the planting area looks awful. And you know, a lot of the big shrubs are now were planted too close to the trees, so the trees aren't doing well. And, you know, I really am a proponent for putting money into park standards and park evaluations, et cetera, because we're wasting our money otherwise building parks when we can't take care of them.
Yeah.
So Shaw Park is really a case in point because it's not very old and it started to decline very fast.
Yeah.
And yet we weren't able to stop that decline. And I have people here at Heron's Quay. Now, these are people who really support cultivating landscapes, you know, that are meant to be cultivated, taking care of gardening and they take care of a lot of the gardening here. I mean, most people probably assume that any service that Heron's Quay hires does all the gardening. That's not true. The residents do a lot of the gardening here. And I don't mean raised beds. I mean really heavy duty gardening, okay? And yet they just have almost given up on Shaw Park. So I know that we're going to be talking about Adopt a Park, but I don't know if I'd be able to get people here to actually agree to adopt that park. And that would have been the first, those would have been the first people I would have talked to because that makes sense. They're right next to that park and they care about plants and trees. They're environmentalists and they have lost hope on Shaw Park. They feel the city doesn't care about it.
Yeah, Georgina, that input is I'm going to just steer it, then say that it's well heard. And though you're not going to see every budgeted item that the city is doing, I'm proposing in the budget for the next year that Shaw Park be investigated, the soil remediation be studied, and start to get the conditions better understood. And it is unacceptable of it just dying off, but I also will not wait for the park master plan to occur in order for us to get ready for the Harbor Hill coordination that's listed here. Mm-hmm. It says 2022 coordinate with Harbor Hill, but it doesn't say Matt is advocating for a study of the soil and the drainage situation and to hire engineering so that we can better advise Harbor Hill when they get ready to supposedly build the second half.
Right. Well, the Harbor Hill open space too, the environmental sanctuary, that is, they're going to start putting in the asphalt accessible roadway after the ponds have been completely drained and the silt removed. So that's good timing to have that on this calendar, actually, because it's right in the process now of beginning. And I would like to get the environmental sanctuary, and I'd like awareness of the fact it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But this is a case in point of, in looking at a lot of these things, when you have the conversation, people become more aware of, oh gosh, look what I now know about Shore Park, as opposed to, you know, and there are lots of things on here I don't know a lot about. So, but the more I know about them, the more I feel I can rank them more correctly.
Yeah, but again, I think this showed two things. You're not ranking capital projects. I wanted to correct that whole suggestion I made earlier in that, and I don't think that would be appropriate here. And then it also points out that sometimes when it says 2022 or 2023, it is because staff has a suggestion and or you've suggested to us that we really need to do something in that area. And that's exactly the case. It's not really a commission work plan item, but it is right now a proposed budget item to council from staff to get into what's going on at Shaw Park before any further planning or development occurs.
Okay.
So I know, Ben, we spent a lot of time and I've promised a new product. I don't know if you're ready to steer us into the next item or if we should take more questions.
I mean, if anybody else have any questions, now would be certainly the time to speak up. But I mean, other than that, I think you're gonna send us out a new.
I am.
Okay,
yep.
A revised edit, and then we will each individual commissioner will prioritize the list how they see fit or based on their experience and comments, and then we'll send them back to you prior to a future deadline before a future meeting.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, like I said, that first draft, shoo. But yeah, there's a couple things clear up, and then yeah, I think it's looking great. And if there's any additional comments or anything like that, feel free to bring it back to the. How would you like that if somebody has something to propose or add or something like that? Is that just send you an email and then you'll incorporate that, or is that at a future meeting discussion? Or
it's better in a meeting discussion, to be honest. I think we really need that kind of back and forth as a group.
Yeah.
But if it's as simple as you forgot something and I think this is an error, please send that to me.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good.
If it's like I think that this is a, you know, if it's something for discussion, then I will defer to the meeting.
Okay.
Ben,
that sounds good. So, I mean, do you want those? I mean, Josh had mentioned, you know, making that maybe the September meeting. Are you thinking maybe August, or I know you guys said you guys are kind of in budget fun right now.
We're probably going to need to have this discussion again in August before we can bring a budget in September for you to review.
Okay, so as in like submit our responses to you, Matthew, and then we come back and discuss what our responses are and see if we can flesh those out, or at the September or the August meeting, and then September we wrap it up.
Yeah, let's be prepared to discuss your rankings at the next meeting in August.
Okay.
So if you can get if you can get your rankings back to us but in advance of the August meeting, then we can have that discussion in August. And then what comes out of that August meeting, if we can get some consensus on your recommendations, that may influence what Matt and Jeff put into the budget, which is what we'll come back to in September to discuss.
Yeah,
fair enough. And
sounds
when you
good.
do send things in, Ben, yeah, please direct them to me, but copy Josh. I mean, if it's related to a work program and he has to talk to council about and so forth. I also think it's good that that no one staff member is there to interpret your votes and say, well, they all voted this way.
Nice. That is appreciated. So thank you.
I have so let me be certain of what I just heard.
Okay.
Matt's going to refine this a little bit, send it out. Josh, you just said we should rank these things essentially 1, 2, 3, get it back to you before August. Is that what I'm hearing?
Right. With approximately 1/3 for each ranking.
Right. That's what I meant. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then at our August meeting, we'll flesh out and get some consensus on the priorities, and then.
Okay.
like we lost Ben.
Yeah, Ben may have just frozen.
Oh, am I back? Sorry.
He's back.
Yes. Les, sorry. Yeah, and hopefully we'll have something to send back to council September, I think is what we're shooting for. So
But my assignment for this before the August meeting is to rank all these things and get it back to Matt. Okay.
With a copy to
bingo.
Josh.
And copied with Josh, yes.
Okay. All right.
Do not send to all commissioners.
No.
Yes, correct. All right. On that note, moving on to staff reports. The Adopt a Park program update.
Yeah,
Matthew, tell us good news.
Yeah, it is good news. The commission and council have adopted an Adopt a Park program in the past. I happen to have resolution 1209 in front of me. And it went ahead and adopted, in case anybody wants to look this up, was adopted back in, I think, March of, let's see, June of 21. And resolution 1209 includes all the attachments that you worked on as a commission, and then staff as well, creating the program, having some policies and roles and responsibilities. The program is to be managed by city administration or deferred person, and the city administrator has deferred that to me. So if you were to take out the policies and go through it, you'll see that we have embraced the Adopt a Park program. And I think that's really exciting. Council was for it and the mayor as well. We had talked about having a pilot project, and I think I shared that with you, but that was a kind of a staff direction and mayor direction that to start with one and to monitor how it's going. And the direction went on to find, do you have organizations that are already active in your parks that have the, I don't want to say proven record, but they do have experience already doing some stewardship work. And so I went through an evaluation of that. I did actually have, in my short time here, 3 active projects occur. But I have a group that I think is best positioned for Adopt a Park, and they are very interested. So I'm talking to them, and they have a process of their own to go through their subcommittees, because it's an organized group. And they have a community services subcommittee that's going to be meeting in about a week. I don't mean to keep it silent, but I don't want to say which group this is in case they choose not to. I don't want it to reflect on them. But most of you probably know that we had a tremendous contribution at Crescent Creek Park this spring. And Crescent Creek Park, with the activities that we have going on there this year, is staff's recommendation for the park to be adopted. And we have an interested group who has great compassion, great interest in the invasive clearing that's already started. So we were able, in the Adopt a Park program, it's meant to be at least a minimum of a 2-year program, to start talking to this group about what they could do over the course of 2 years. This is staff directed, but I would be happy to share with you more about that as it takes a little more shape. One of the parameters I introduced was that we should always be revisiting volunteer projects and Adopt a Park projects every few months so that they're not just forgotten. And so it coincided that from Earth Day, it was about 3 months or so since their activity, and we went and walked the site with more than one of these club members. So we started this constant evaluation, constant feedback part that I think is really important for a volunteer program to feel integrated and appreciated. And I'd like to invite them to come to the Park Commission as early as August, September, to say, this is what we've agreed to do, and this is our program, and we're excited about the next 2 years. Again, this is something that staff has by the procedures to work out with them. But I know as the creators of this, I would love for them to be recognized by you and come before you and share all of that. So that's in the works. I don't foresee any problem. We have the waivers, we have all the documentation ready, and we have a lot of community enthusiasm. The timing couldn't be better in my mind for Crescent Creek Park, because stewardship is really important, especially if you're talking about a community park. And having that active stewardship groups means a lot of ambassadors who are saying, hey, we're talking about this park and a master plan process this year. So it's my strong recommendation to go with Crescent Creek Park and to go with the most qualified group that's stepped forward so far.
So just to clarify.
Certainly.
Oh, sorry. I just.
Go ahead, Stephanie, sorry.
Clarification. We're looking at recommending one park and one group to adopt that park.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
That was the mayor's direction to do so.
Recommended, and then groups could adopt those parks.
Did you say in the future, Stephanie?
Yeah.
Yeah. The mayor directed us to pick one and one, as you just said. Okay. And with the idea that we would learn from it and be able to ideally offer this program more widely.
Great. Thank you.
So as far as our scope of work going there, it sounded like they're mostly focusing on invasives.
Yes, and I don't know how much to get into this, but there is an under accessed area along the creek, and it's not being environmentally stewarded, so to say. The naming of this park from City Park to Crescent Creek Park was in part an intentional decision to try to improve access to the creek and understanding with education, not develop hard shores lines, don't get me wrong. It was a sensitivity to the creek and the natural environment that was getting asserted years ago. So I have that direction to give them, like, well, what is already, without a master plan, a priority for this park? And it clearly has, and it's a union negotiated task, ivy pulling and remediation of blackberries and so forth. That is perfectly in line with the union, and it's in line with a direction that this park is already headed. And I think it's going to be instructive that the public can actually come into an area that right now is off limits. We've acquired additional parcels, as some of you know, and I'd be happy to walk it with anybody, but you just physically can't get from part of the park to another part of the park. And there's some environmental benefit and functions that just really would be much beneficial for everyone to have access to and see, so that we can do this appropriate master planning.
I'd be interested in doing that walk if other people would too. So I think that would be really helpful, knowing what's coming up.
Yeah.
The more we know about that park, the better.
Yeah, I'll say the next thing on your agenda is park project updates, I think. Is that right? Am I reading that? Park division update. Yeah. And one of the things I'd really be highlighting, and hoping you're not all traveling, but in August, we'll be on the site several times with the consultant, and I'll be making myself publicly available for anyone, neighbors and stakeholders and so forth, who would like just to walk and talk. So August is going to be kind of that on the ground time in the park. Hopefully not too hot, hopefully a pleasure, but I'll make sure you all know those times and dates.
So is that what you refer to as tours / meetups at parks? Okay, I think, I was going to suggest this because I did that with another city. We would, it was called the Forest and Beach Commission, but it also did parks. And also the Planning Commission and the City Council, they used to have tours, based on their agenda, and the public could come and meet up at a certain time. And everyone got to hear it together. It's a great plan. It's very educational. It keeps the public involved in the process.
Yeah, Ben, was there a pre-COVID Parks Commission tour of the city? It seems to me like a lot of cities do that.
I mean, we hosted a couple of meetings on site occasionally, but that was about it. That was the extent of it.
Yeah, well, when we get into master planning for Crescent Creek Park, some of your meetings, it might make sense to get down to the park. I can't promise we can get into the Masonic Hall, but you never know.
I would look forward to that.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
So the park division update, that was one of the things I wanted to highlight, was that HBB is getting closer to contract. They're scheduled to go to council with a contract on the 25th of July. So that's only about 2 weeks time. They know that, and I'm hoping it's been scoped out well. They're actually going to give me something called additives to their scope of work. And that will allow council to see, like, are we ready to go ahead and afford at this time an archaeological study beyond just the required study, meaning get to look a little deeper. They will also look at the architect, which staff is recommending that there be an architectural architectural review of the building for assembly purposes. So it's a little different than a structural full assessment, but still it's an additive item. And I'm really hoping council will agree we should do that. That proposed contract with additive items with a staff recommendation, again, should go forward on the 25th. If you're tracking dates, some of you like calendars, I think it's already brought up, but Sports Complex 1B is going to City Council study session on the 14th. And they're going to hear, as you already heard, a lot of what you heard tonight and the direction that staff is picking up on design choices. I want you guys to know that as a parks professional, I weighed in heavily on 1B. It presents a lot of good design, but also a lot of possibilities that I think they need to take into account. I heard shade was brought up today. That was one of my thoughts, also in seating. And I heard Jeff start to talk about some of those things, but they do need to be heavily evaluated from my perspective, and I will do that part of my job. Play equipment. I'm really keen to know the choices. I'll share with you my own opinion, which is that thematic playgrounds really, they often have a time and place and then they don't make sense, or people bore them. That's my expectation, or they don't fit. They need to be really carefully put into a context. And when I saw like the nature trees and so forth, it was almost insensitive to me in the regard to the fact that we're just taking down trees. So
I agree.
Yeah, I'm definitely willing, and it puts me in a hot spot, but willing to speak up on ways of getting community appropriate and involvement. And I know that more than one, I think it was a council member who has asked, are you doing anything for senior programming with the evaluations and school age children? And so I'd like to say that that is not forgotten, that there may be additional outreach that can happen as school comes back in September. Okay, so 1B we covered.
Matthew, you said July 25th for the City Council work study session?
No, study session on 1B is the 14th.
Okay,
the 25th is when the HBB contract will go in front of council, and that's not really something of much public engagement on that, but I just wanted you to know that we're progressing.
Okay.
I thought you'd be very interested to know that Edinburgh Brick House is getting closer to being open to the public. They'd like to do a kind of soft opening, meaning start doing scheduling as soon as we get a user agreement in place. But the grand opening is likely to be an event in September. And that'll be when all the publicity will go forward that we have a working reservation system for the public to have, as you recall, half the days of the year dedicated to any public group that would like to use it. But the user agreement's advanced. It's included setting a rate, and the rate for use of the Edinburgh Brick House is needing to be, and this is by staff assertion, but also their agreement, only the costs that the Edinburgh shop has, not a profit, not a gathering a little extra fee or anything like that. So the issue, where they are right now is $50 an hour. And that's because they have staff present. And then they have built into that their cleaning fee, which is really not going to be significant. But $50 an hour with a 2-hour minimum, I share that with you. It's not like we can really discuss that. It's not on your agenda or anything. But as we think about access to public facilities, I do hope we develop robust policies about how we treat nonprofits and how we deal with user groups like the Little League, for example, and being sure that the city's costs are covered. But I'll just give you this little example that's still in my mind. The Girl Scouts want to use the Edinburgh Brick House, and they'd like to use it every week. I'm not sure they're going to be able to afford it at $100 a week because there's that 2-hour minimum. I'm not saying it's wrong. Edinburgh's trying to cover their costs and be reasonable about when their staff is present and not present. And we're glad to have somebody able to program and offer recreation or at least facility access. But I hope we talk more about equitable fees And I would welcome that at the Parks Commission. Right.
Can you back up just a little bit on the Masonic Lodge, on what the scope would be for HPB that you're recommending, and what does that mean in the long term about that building?
Yeah, it's going to be talking about its ability, given its square footage and its historic development, so to say, how it could be used for assembly purposes. They will do some structural analysis based around that. Like, is there enough fire code preventions, ADA? Is this gathering space would support how many people? What are some program things that this building footprint could do within a park? They're going to ask use questions and assembly structural questions. They're not going to evaluate the entire building and come up with a cost for remodeling and renovation. That is to be after we've done this process of figuring out what the ideal use of the building is in relations to the park.
So you're thinking, you already have something in mind about what the ideal use is because you're talking about assembly. So what is that?
Yeah, so assembly would be a public space, mostly, as I should translate that to public space, and for community activities, whether it be classrooms, whether it be meeting room, whether it be even light recreation. Could it be for concerts? Could it be for art shows? That would be public assembly, where you don't have a registered number of people. You have the ability to open the doors and close the doors to maximum occupancy. And what is that? And that would instruct us on what we could use that building for.
So it could be flexible use?
Yes, for sure.
So where you have maybe, you could divide it into smaller rooms or larger.
Right, sure, yeah. Other projects for you guys to know, the Scansey Net Shed project.
Can I go, sorry.
Yep.
Can I go back to the Eden Boat Brick House real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. When is final opportunity to provide comment on the user agreement?
Well, I'm afraid the user agreement isn't really a public comment item.
Okay, so is that council or are you writing that up with the Eden Boat Shop people?
It's falling to city administration. So okay. I will say that it doesn't stay with me. I don't make the decisions, but I'm working on it.
Okay.
And I am glad to share with you where it is, and I can share that kind of thing. And then by your public comment and your own agenda setting, we could talk about equitable fees.
Yeah.
Or whatever else you're concerned about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I think sometimes I tell you things that I'm working on so that you guys can decide that's something I want to talk about at a future meeting.
Just to clarify, the fee structure for the Eden Brick House will be a council action. So there will be some council involvement at some point where you can make public comment.
Okay. Hey, Josh, I don't mean to ever challenge you. You know fee schedule better than I do, but Daniel was making it their fee, our city attorney, sorry, everyone. Our city attorney said this is their fee and we won't be charging it.
The lease agreement with the boathouse says that the city council shall approve the fee structure for the boathouse.
Exactly. But the fee structure is still their fee. So I don't know that it'll make our fee schedule.
Yeah, but there will be a council action. So there will be opportunity for comment.
Okay, thank you.
And then how was the 50% of the days divvied up? Did we come to some sort of resolution to that?
That has not been resolved, and that is something that is being discussed. I think that there's already a cooperative aspect to this, though, that it'll be balanced in terms of evenings, days, and weekends. But I know that part of what we've said, and I don't like using this as an excuse, but we've said let's learn a lot as we go and watch the reservations together and see that if anybody's been denied or it's, we need to build in an evaluation to it so that the reservations that they're going to manage are still accountable to the city to see that it's been done equitably and fairly.
Oh, they're managing the reservation system too?
They are.
Oh. Gotcha.
I was actually on the board of the boat shop when that original agreement was written, and there was a lot of back and forth.
Yeah.
But it's basically 180 in terms of the division of days. And being a person who runs a nonprofit and a facility, there are always costs associated with that. So even if the boat shop is managing the days that the city is, using or renting or whatever, I know there's more details to work out with the council. The only way to really make it free for people or very low cost is if the city's willing to pick up some of that cost associated with, staffing, scheduling, cleaning the space, whether it's a city day or a boat shop day. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's wear and tear. We face that with our room here, and we try to charge minimal fees, but ultimately when it costs $7,000 to $8,000 to replace the wooden floor, where is that money coming from? So if we're not building that into the fee structure, then we don't have a reserve to maintain those buildings. Now we could say that taxpayer dollars are already paying for that stuff, but then we have to make sure that as part of that historic structure within the park, we are putting aside reserve dollars to help with the wear and tear and the maintenance of those facilities.
So is it an expectation that the Ed and Boat Shop will pay for repairs to a public building?
No.
I think Stephanie was just bringing up that fees are broader than people realize.
Gotcha.
But this is a partnership with us owning the capital project, including the need for reserves.
I think I kind of derailed that conversation. I apologize. Definitely a conversation for another day.
Well, I think you guys should know that also September is likely the Austin Estuary, Tualacut Estuary, where we're looking at doing the honoring statue. I know you're keen to know date, and so is the city, to be honest with you. It's never meant to be like, we're putting that off. But as you saw in probably the printed report, there was an adjustment to one of the galvanized plates that the whole statue will sit on. So I guess they just don't want to promise when, but the idea is warming up to the idea of having it in September, certainly before the bad weather comes in. And the celebration is likely to be a really special day. There is talk about tribal partnerships beyond just Austin Park, and maybe some ways of talking about things that we've done together over the years and we'll promise to do together. So I will keep you up to date when we know when that's going up. And I mentioned Scansy real quickly. It might be worth knowing that the Scansy Net Shed has a limited budget, but it's a budgeted item this year for roof repair. There was a structural analysis that was done though, and it's likely to go back in front of council for additional funding beyond about a $300,000 budget for its roof. And that has to do with trying to ensure the load bearing is safe. Some of the members, I wouldn't say that they are not, so they can't handle, the wood members can't handle the load, but when the engineer who did the review started to look at snow load and other things that could put the building in danger. So there's a potential rescoping of that project. Some people think that should have been done by now, but I will say that the rescoping is probably part of doing a more comprehensive job. That'll be a sensitive project though, if they really need to introduce modern technology or modern materials into the building, which may be unavoidable, but I hope it's done carefully, like sistering of logs where you don't see the new member. Anyway, I think that's what I have. I'll tell you that I mentioned we don't have a comprehensive sign program. That's something I'd like to work on. If I could design my own work program, which I need to do probably, I'll put a sign program for the city parks on it. Paddler's project, Paddler's Dock. There is still continuing interest in having some historical markers or even naming of it, the families that have been involved on the property before the city. And then we did put up signage for rules, all of which is kind of like, yeah, okay, but that, and then donations that come and other things, they should probably be put into a program. So that's something that a park professional would really advocate for. So I'd like to be bringing some of that in front of you in the future. There is finally, my last thing to tell you, a plaque policy that is just a draft. but it'll make its way likely directly to council, but it's not without your interest, I would suspect. It would certainly impact parks. But the plaque policy is the beginning, I think, of standardizing signage without constraining the community's like creativity and artistic expression. But a plaque is a plaque. And believe it or not, I needed to write up policy about it because some people want this and they want that. And the policy basically tries to suggest what that a process goes on, that the copy is carefully studied, and that we realize what's being acknowledged and not acknowledged. It's minutia I don't really want to get into, but I'll just tell you that the plaque policy touches things like memorializing something or dedicating a flagpole, and it touches we're the stewards of this park, and sometimes they use big blue placards to say such. You think of Little League and other places, it varies. So I think the plaque policy is part of opening the door to a sign program, and ideally showing a relationship without too much restriction, but that we are anticipating signs of different sizes and purposes and what they should look like.
I fully support that, just want to say, but I also think it's important to differentiate between plaques, historic markers, and signs. I know that seems like minutia, but
no, Stephanie, you're right. And
difference between that stuff. Yeah.
Stephanie, I'd like to share that part of that draft with you because I made sure to exclude it from historical markers. It's not the same thing as government and government informational signs like no parking. Some of that stuff is standard and important, and you don't play. That's not what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah, and you probably already know that the Downtown Waterfront Alliance and the museum are working together on, the sort of historic marker. We did the inventory, but they have I don't know, it's not really a mission or a commandment, but a directive, you might say, to do these house markers. Mm-hmm. And like they did for Molich House. And so they're looking at another one. And so we're trying to establish some specific guidelines. So obviously whatever you're working on and what they're working on, they should probably mesh together so that they're very complementary instead of working at odds.
I think that's a great idea. In London, they do the blue plates.
Oh, right.
And then you see the blue, you go up and read it,
Yeah.
It really catches on. It's great.
That's cool.
Well, that's my report. I know it's gotten late. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Matthew. I got one question for you. So at the bottom of Dorotich Street is a pier. Is that a public pier or is that part of the marina there?
I missed which location.
On Dorotich Street, but kind of around the corner from Millville Pizza. At the street end, there's a public pier dock. I don't know. It's the one with the one with the hole in the middle.
Let's poll the audience. Stephanie?
Public, city.
I don't think that's on our parks inventory.
I privately own, I'll bet.
Yeah, there is public access down through there though, Ben. There's a trail that connects from that roadway through that condo development to the net shed. And that includes public access out onto a dock, but It's not at the end of the street. It's kind of in between. It's halfway to the net shed. You can go out just west of the net shed. There's actually a public access to a dock there.
Oh, where the water feature is and stuff like that, kind of starting there.
Yeah, right in that area. There's a public access trail. Not many people are on it or know about it, but it's really a nice little walk connection through there.
I think that was done as part of the mitigation with Arabella's Landing.
I think you're right. Yeah.
But the dock that you're talking about, Ben, I was always of the impression that was a city dock, but maybe not. Maybe that was part of that mitigation process.
I think you're onto it that it's got public access, but it's not city owned, and shoreline management plans do provide for that. When you think about some of our interesting downtown newer developments, they may have like an overlook or a platform. You're like, why is that there? And it's required.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's just a nice feature, and I was like, why isn't this in our inventory? That makes sense. Okay, thank you. Moving on to staff report, letter C with Josh, city administration update.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. Council is considering an ordinance, their meetings in July, that will make all of the city's boards and commissions will be mayor appointed going forward. So we won't have the 3-person city council interview committee structure to do that. So it'll be up to the mayor to make the appointments for these. Council will make a confirmation of anyone that the mayor puts up for appointment, but that'll be the extent of their involvement. So it'll be a little bit different process. We'll still, put out notice for applications, collect applications. It'll just be the mayor will be the chief decision maker going forward. So that should be going through this month, and that'll affect the Parks Commission in the future when you all are up for reappointment. The other thing we are rolling out is we're asking council for approval on the 11th to allow us to implement the C-Click Fix program, which a lot of cities use. It's basically a platform that the residents, the public can access, and anytime they have any kind of concern or comment or issue, it's just a one-stop shop platform where they can enter their information and will get directly routed to the right people to respond. It integrates with Cartograph, which is the public works operations tracking system for all of their issues. So it'll give the public a really easy way to report issues directly to our operations staff, and parks will be a huge part of that. So once we get signed up for that and get that rolled out, we'll probably bring it back to the Parks Commission and show you how it works and get your feedback on features you'd like to see us implement, because it's really easy to customize. And if there's any kind of options you want to see put on it, that'll be something we can do. Another part of that is that it will come with its own dedicated City of Gig Harbor app. So anyone can go on the App Store and search for City of Gig Harbor, and they can download our very own app, which will interface with that. So if you're standing in a park and you see a piece of playground equipment that's broken, you can hop right on there, take a picture of it, and send it right up to the city, and it'll get instantly sent to us that way. And the app will also have quite a few other features, like sending out general alerts from the city. It'll interface with the city's website. So we're moving up in the world technologically wise. So we hope to have that rolled out pretty soon. We should be able to get council approval right away and get that process started. I think that's about it for me for now.
Great, thanks for sharing, Josh. Yeah, I look forward to that app. You said that looks like it might be coming online pretty quick.
It should, yeah. It shouldn't be anything slowing it down once council approves it. So
that sounds like a pretty good one. It was called what? C-Click or
C-Click Fix.
C-Click Fix.
Yeah,
got that one, Georgina.
It's pretty much industry standard. I think a lot of cities use it. Pierce County uses it. So if you want to look at what Pierce County has on their website, you can see how it looks.
Awesome. That sounds great. Look forward to that. You said that was it. Any other questions for Josh before he wraps up?
Are we still pursuing Louise's idea then also for?
So Josh had mentioned
a larger discussion we're going to have. I'm going to talk to Louise offline about that. We can't use Google as a platform for that. We have other options for that. The city has built-in infrastructure to do what she's doing with Google. I wasn't really aware of this until your last meeting. So when she's back from vacation, I'll touch base with her and see what we can roll out. So I don't think it will replace that program, but I think that program is going to need to undergo some revisions to make it compatible with what we can actually do here at the city.
Okay.
Good question. Thanks, Georgina. Anything else for Josh? No? All right, we're gonna move on to commissioner reports and comments. So this is an opportunity as a commissioner just to give any public comment on existing parks or where our commissioners who are part of any committees can give their reports back. Georgina is part of the Climate Action Committee?
It's actually the Climate Change Comprehensive Plan Amendment Committee. So it's the CCC PAC.
CCC. I don't know if you've had, that is a mouthful, by the way.
It does explain what we do though. So.
Yes, it does. I don't know if you want to start, if you have a report back at all, or.
I do. Do you want me to do it? It's getting late, but if you want me to, I will. I have them.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
So these meetings are roughly 2 weeks apart, and you know, overall they will have some information for Parks Commission projects that are upcoming, especially when you're master planning or you're dealing with a building, etc., as to you know, what is being investigated and what is being considered, and what the new rules are and the new ordinances about climate change mitigation and adaptation. So you know, as I read through this, and it doesn't all apply to parks, but in general, it will at some point apply to parks. So on June 8th, the meeting was on it was sort of on transportation, but it was on a regional approach. There's going to be another meeting actually specifically on transportation, but this had some information on transportation. So the CCC Pact is focusing on regional climate change planning, so Gig Harbor doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. At this meeting, Kelly McGorty, Puget Sound Regional Council's Director of Transportation Planning, gave a presentation on regional approaches to climate change. The PSRC is working on the project Vision 2050 in climate, and its goal is to have the region substantially reduce emissions of greenhouse gases in accordance with the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency goals of 50% below 1990 levels by 2030 and 80% below 1990 levels by 2050, and 2, prepare for climate change impacts. The project has many components, including a 4-part greenhouse gas strategy that takes into consideration land use, expanded and integrated regional transit network, user fees through the state facility tolls and transition to a road usage charge in later years, and technology goals that will focus on zero emissions vehicles, clean fuel standards, etc. The PSRC is also focusing on a regional transportation plan with steps to meeting regional climate goals that include fuel economy improvements and transition to a zero emissions transportation system. They're also working on an analysis for a regional emissions inventory that consists of 7 regional partner agencies who are developing a comprehensive update of regional greenhouse gas emissions, including a, quote, wedge analysis, quote, that is an identification of scenarios and pathways for reducing emissions across the sectors of the region. They will also focus on social equity, process, and outcomes. The inventory will be completed by December 22nd, but may be finished sooner. For zero emissions transportation, the Regional EV Collaboration Partnership Project began in 2019, and its goal is to advance electric vehicles throughout the region, providing support to local jurisdictions. They have hosted 4 forums to date and are working towards a clearinghouse of data and best practices. They will coordinate their project with the Department of Commerce's work under HB 1287. Future work will be the Regional EV Zero Emissions Plan. Resilience, Puget Sound Climate Preparedness Collaborative is a multi-agency regional coordination and collaboration on climate preparedness and resilience. Comprehensive Plan Guidance on Climate, the PSRC is addressing both mitigation and resilience/preparedness that will include a summary of Special Vision 2050 policies and actions, including best practices and examples, resources and links, and meeting jurisdictions where they are. Specific to resilience, we'll be encouraging internal coordination with emergency management departments, public works, etc. There is no expectation that every agency will address every issue or create complex work programs, and the focus will be on particular needs in each community or jurisdiction. The goal is to have guidance completed by July/August 2022. There will be a climate guidance workshop in July. Other Vision 2050 webinars are coming up with an introduction on June 18th. Housing and other areas are currently pending. The other meeting we had was June 22nd, and that was on buildings. There were two presentations on climate resiliency for buildings. The first was given by Beth Doglio, Senior Consultant with Climate Solutions. Washington State is ahead of most states, and the state legislature in 2019 passed bills with the goal to become completely electrified by 2045. She spoke about the clean fuels standards coupled with the Climate Commitment Act and buildings performance standards. In January 2022, CO2 credits were being set up and efficiency standards were being established based on buildings 20,000 square feet or larger. They must meet an energy standard. Benchmarking will start to include municipal buildings. An energy survey will be required. Why buildings? What we do at the local level really counts. Many households are fueled by natural gas, heating, cooking, etc. 1 new house per minute is added with natural gas nationwide. Of course, natural gas is a fossil fuel. Buildings are the fastest growing emitters of greenhouse gases in Washington. 2021 state energy plan shows electrification of buildings is the lowest cost way to reduce greenhouse gases. We need to write this into our comprehensive plan amendment, build all electric. Berkeley, California did this in 2019. 65 other communities nationwide have followed suit. Gas furnaces and water heating are two of the biggest issues. Heat pumps need to heat and cool, first thing to be retrofitted in homes. Gas use has effects on health. Gas appliances emit pollutants, carbon, nitrogen, particle pollution, and formaldehyde, even when turned off. She suggests vent use for stoves. So when you're cooking with gas, you should always have the vent on. Furnaces and hot water heaters vent to the outside. Nitrogen oxide is an issue. Equity issue, people push to areas already high in pollutants. Make sure our plans include all residents. Pipeline explosions are also a threat. Earthquakes and avalanches are a risk to natural gas pipelines. All electric buildings are more resilient. Loss of jobs in fossil fuel industry is an issue. However, other jobs will be created because of the transition to electric. Upfront costs of new buildings is less with electricity, more stable energy prices versus natural gas. Tech advisory groups at Building Code Council provided input for July 2023 to have a ban on new gas hookups, commercial for now. At state level, what can we do at the city level? The SBCC, which is the State Building Code Council, is considering residential code updates, carbon-based building performance standards, looking for public comment right now for residential code changes. Seattle is leading the way. Subsidizing residents to convert to electric. City of Gig Harbor can commit to this in many different ways. Cities should commit to retrofitting existing buildings. Bellevue is doing this with a bond measure on the next ballot. It can give demos with induction stovetops. Then there was a presentation by Kathleen Petrie of King County Green Building Community-wide Program Manager. She provides training, direct consultation, etc. regarding green building, provides guidance to King County's 2020 Strategic Climate Action Plan, produced a climate action toolkit to help other communities. Shifting to Zero promotes a zero carbon building policy toolkit introduced, which would be useful for Gig Harbor. There's a regional code collaboration group, which is statewide. Help with short-staffed communities and is a useful resource. Code development process, national code updates go to the states figure out subgroups to adopt the codes. Residential code amendments are being considered at the state level with proposals and final testimony in September. Commercial codes were already updated with no electrical resistance heating, heat pumps only, and included low flow shower heads and faucets. Air leakage standards are also upgraded. Lighting updates also included, which saves owner/rental money, as well as an HVAC fault detection diagnostic system. EV charging is facing challenges. All new buildings with detached garages need 208 volt outlets. Loans, benefits, and opportunities for building upgrades, including CPESO, which is a program that doesn't use any government funds, is a loan agreement between a private lender and the property owner, like a mortgage or home improvement loan. The meeting of July 13th is on transportation and land use. And the meeting on July 27th is on state issues, waste, and community engagement. There you go. Lots going on.
No kidding. Well, so that sounds very informational, that's for sure.
Well, it shows that there's a lot of regional support. You know, when Gig Harbor gets going with its climate action plan, it's fortunate that Gig Harbor won't have to go it alone. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, I look forward, I mean, just on the transportation bit, you know, it's like, okay, how many, you know, electric vehicle stations are going to be at the new sports complex and stuff like that? It's like,
yeah, you know, the parking lots are the ideal place, you know, to make sure that people always can connect to electricity when they're driving their EV. So, because that's the big fear, isn't it, of EV owners? Well, where am I going to charge the car? So.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your information on that and reporting back to us. I mean, a lot of information there.
Maybe too much.
No, it's good. Thank you, Georgina. Appreciate that. Any other comments for the good of the order? Yeah, Will, go ahead.
Just one real quick follow-up on your observation, Ben, and maybe Matt, you could follow up on it. And that is those public access easements that allow folks more access. I mean, can we be sure that those are displayed? While they're not a park, they should be displayed on the same map because it is an amenity that can be utilized. So can you just follow up? And I'm hoping it's just yeah, it's on there and it's known. Yeah, it'd be great because I think it is a great little walk. Good place to go hang out.
Yeah, it's not on my maps, and I'm glad you guys brought it up. I think it does exist. I've seen shoreline access areas on a map, but nobody thought to put them together.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's all.
We are looking at expanding those too. Another thing that's going before council this week is the Pleasurecraft Marinas. We're approving easements that are going to give them, they're building a restaurant down there by Scansey Brothers Park, and one of the easements will be a staircase that provides public access as part of a continuous waterway path around the harbor. So this is an evolving thing, and yeah, it would be great to have some kind of a map to show people that yes, you can walk around the harbor and get a lot closer than just walking on the sidewalk on Harborview.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's represented in like somewhere like the Harborview Trail or if it's, you know, something like that, but I'd be keen to have because yeah, you're right. I mean, that's a beautiful walk through that Arabella's Landing there. I mean, yeah. Did Murphy's Landing, when in their whatever they're doing over there, are they doing any public access? I mean, they already have that boardwalk though, huh?
That is a total public access with a commitment to the city already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that connect? Is there any connectivity on either side? I know the one side exits right there where Austin Park is, but on the, I don't know what side that is, the south side, is that connectivity to the sidewalk area?
Well, it's contentious to tell you the truth, and it takes some discussion, but on both sides of the Edgewater condo building are stairs, sidewalks that go down. And there's discussion on who's responsible for that. That's why the Edgewater closes it off every winter, so we're not liable for anybody falling down that thing. But that is technically access. Most people go on the boardwalk and enter right into the West Shore Marina by squeezing through a little area, so, and don't go up a very steep set of stairs.
Gotcha. Huh. All right. Anything else? Anybody else want to add anything? Comments? Call it a meeting?
Those were great ones there at the end, though. I'm going to be investigating all those easements.
Yeah, I can tell you right now that the dock at the end of Dorotich is that Tideland property that it sits on is owned by Gig Harbor Marina, or Arabella's Landing, basically.
Ah, it is part of theirs. Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yep.
Good to know. Yeah, it's a pretty cool private one. I mean, usually I'm the only one down there. I've been there, you know, half a dozen times. No one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else on that note?
The only
Move that
thing
we.
that has
Oh, yeah,
come
go
up,
ahead.
I just want to put in a plug once again for the care of historic structures and finding a way to work with the organizations that are actually programming those structures so that everyone is on the same page about the care of the structure, what's appropriate inside of a historic structure, collections that are part of those, because I know there's also a big collection in Wilkinson Barn. We have the collection from the Scansey House. So there's some work that needs to be done if we're going to be good caretakers of historic structures in park properties. So,
yeah, absolutely.
In particular that go with those. Yeah.
Okay. All right. On that note, I move that we adjourn tonight's meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Nope. All right, everybody. Meeting adjourned. Have a great night.
You
Get your
too.
homework